All right, everybody, welcome back. We are moving on to Module 3.3 and the concept of sustainability. So in our previous lecture, we were talking specifically about ecosystem ecology, but now we're going to be shifting into the idea of sustainability and what that means in terms of biology. Now, in the videos I've asked you to watch this week, one of the videos was looking at biodiversity, and one of the critical points the video made is that despite indigenous communities contributing the least to climate change, they are inevitably the ones that are often most impacted by climate change. And so one of the sort of change makers in this field is an indigenous woman named Dr. Carlotta Chief, and she's at the University of Arizona. She's of the Navajo Nation, and she's been doing a lot of really interesting research looking at how climate change impacts indigenous communities in the U.S., and particularly the role that indigenous leaders can contribute to understanding and influencing policy and change within the different nations in the United States. This is just an abstract from one of her recent studies looking at indigenous experiences in the U.S. with climate change, environmental stewardship in the Anthropocene. And then I've asked you to also watch a video looking at specifically her work and a mining spill that occurred in the Navajo Nation. And these are the sort of questions that we're going to be sort of thinking about. And this is basically understanding where humans fit in to these larger dynamic changes that are happening in the world today. So moving on to our driving questions we're going to be thinking about for sustainability. The first one is really what human impacts are considered in determining an ecological footprint. So this is basically a dynamic measure of understanding how much resources populations are contributing to the planet, and importantly, how does human population size influence our impact on the Earth? Secondly, what resources do we as humans really rely on, and which ones are renewable? And lastly, what are we sort of talking about when we're really talking about this idea of sustainable living? So ultimately, sustainability is the use of Earth's resources in a way that's not going to permanently destroy or deplete them, and living within the limits of Earth's biocapacity, which is really this ability to sustain human demand given the available resources that exist. And again, what we're going to be looking at with biocapacity is basically this idea of the amount of supplies that it's able to meet demand of a particular region or people. And this is going to change from country to country, from city to city even. It depends on what unit of measure you're thinking about with biocapacity. So when we're talking about biocapacity, when we're talking about sustainability, you'll often sort of hear this word ecological footprint thrown around. And really what that is it's a measure of how much land and water area is required to supply the resources of an individual or population and absorb the waste it produces. So you can look at measures how fast we consume resources and generate waste. So basically it's a buildup. You can look at what it's compared to, and this is just a helpful graphic to sort of understand some of these things that we might be thinking about when we're considering an ecological footprint. So in 2018, we measured the Earth's total biocapacity as 12 billion gigahectare, and ultimately looking at that, we're saying, okay, so how much is allocated then per person? So per person, we get 1.8 gigahectare per person. And a gigahectare is about like a little bit over the size of a football field if you're thinking about in terms of actual area. And unfortunately, when we look at what we're actually consuming, we're seeing that our footprint is actually much bigger than that. It's about 2.7 gigahectare per person. So, and because the average human ecological footprint is greater than the Earth's total biocapacity, our demand on Earth's resources, it's currently outstripping its supply, and by quite a lot, by almost 1 gigahectare per person. So this is a good way of visually looking at what we're thinking in terms of our biological demand. So this dotted red line here is showing Earth's current biocapacity. And then these are the different contributing factors for each of these. And you can see what's really pushing us over this Earth's biocapacity is the amount of carbon that we're using. And that's the one that's been increasing dramatically. And that's currently what is really driving our demand on biocapacity over what over 1 in this case. That being said, biocapacity and consumptions do vary greatly. And in the quiz this week, you're going to see some graphs that are looking at different countries' biocapacity and where they look like. Ultimately, it's not even. We see that the U.S. obviously has a larger pattern of consumption than other areas on the planet. So it's important to think things through in terms of, again, understanding what scale you want to talk about, because the consumption is going to vary very differently from the United States or countries in the EU to, for example, Venezuela. Going to have very, very different ideas of what biocapacity is. Also, the amount of resources that are available within a country are going to, again, vary how much the biocapacity. It's going to look at the biocapacity at these different regions. So in summary, when we're thinking about sustainability, we're talking about the ability of humans to live within the Earth's biocapacity. And ultimately, as ecologists, what we do is we measure human demand on Earth's resources by looking at ecological footprint analysis. And really, we can assess the sustainability by comparing our ecological footprint to the biocapacity. So that's how ecologists really think through this idea of sustainability. It's not just, whether or not humans are recycling. It's really understanding the supply and demand of resources that are available on the Earth. All right, that sums up our discussion for Module 3.3, and I will see you for Module 3.4.